you know, as opposed to having like a whole bag of lenses and deciding between a 28 and a 35 or a 35 and a 50 or a 50 and a 75 or a 75 or an 85, like, you know, 24 or 28 or 20 and 24 or 16 or 20. It's like you could drive yourself crazy when it makes absolutely no difference at that point. Like you are wasting time, you are losing your focus. See what I did there? First of all, this is completely unscripted. Actually, that's kind of funny that I would even say that, because I have literally never scripted a YouTube video, so I don't even know why I just said that, but I don't know. Why is it really important, in my opinion, my humble opinion? I'm not saying it's right for you, but this is my opinion. Why do I think it's so important for most people to stick with 2 focal lengths when making a film? I mean, there are so many other things to think about. And so I think it's a great exercise in focusing, restraint. I mean, just dealing with the things that really matter. All right, so I didn't actually quit social media. Like I didn't completely, you know, like deactivate my accounts and stuff like that. But I did leave being active at social media, let's put it that way. You know, like I'm not looking at anybody else's pages for sure. I'm not really looking up and down the timeline. I am posting my own work, you know. I am being responsible with, you know, knowing that most people live there. And so as an artist, if I want to stay connected to the world, the outside world, and if I want to share the work that I create, then yeah, I got to be on social media. I think you should pick a relatively wide focal length and a relatively long. Like in my case, 28 millimeters, 50 millimeters, I'm done. That's it. I know a lot of people use 24 and 50, maybe 28 and 85 or whatever, you know, whatever. I think maybe a good start is, what do you have? But what I don't like about social media, and what I think kind of, you know, like magnifies the importance of being a filmmaker, is that social media is like a timeline where the thought of the moment, you know what I mean? The thing that's happening for right now is going to be gone just a few moments later, you know? Like we're going to completely forget about it. And I think you should do it with prime lenses, because I think you can get more out of a prime lens. You know, it's probably faster than any zoom lens that you have. And also I think prime lenses, you know, force you to move around a little bit more, to be a little bit more intentional with your framing and your composition. I mean, there's just so much other stuff to think about, you know, like, you know, if you kind of take these 2 focal lengths out of the equation, then you're going to start to think about your, you know, your white balance, your ISO settings, like I said, your composition, your story, the most important thing. Making a film is something that's going to stop time. It's like being a photographer, and I also think that photography is so important right now because it literally stops time and it documents a moment, you know. It tells us what was happening in that moment, and it's like indisputable. Although I guess with AI now, everything's disputable to a certain extent, but you know, if you believe in anything anymore, then it's completely indisputable. Like, this is what happened in that moment, and it's going to live forever. You know, like I said, in my case, I work with 28 and 50, unless I'm working with my anamorphic lenses, which I work with 35 millimeter and a 75 millimeter, both of which are APS-C. So it's really 50 and 115-ish or whatever that would be, 120. But it's anamorphic, so it's a little bit different, you know. And my Panasonic S5 has APS-C mode, so those lenses work perfectly for me. And, you know, really 35 is kind of like a 35. So I'm kind of in 35 to 75 range when I'm doing anamorphic, which is basically the same as 28 to 50, kind of, you know, in terms of the final product and what I can do with it and what the film is going to look like and what the shots are going to look like and what my options are and, you know, what the possibilities are of what I want it to look like, you know, the contrast between the close shots and the far shots, the wide shots and the, you know, the shots that are more kind of inhibited with space, like it's basically the same. And so I think it's really, I mean, there are so many things to think about that are so much more important than thinking about your focal length, you know. And I think about that a lot. So, when is it okay to protect your peace? You know, to not allow anything in your environment to upset you, to kind of take you off your groove, you know what I mean? To disturb your groove, to just kind of push everything out of your mind and rest, you know, and kind of take care of yourself. How long can you do that if the whole world is burning around you? And also, if you're creating a narrative, if you're creating fictional work, then you're creating something that's more than just a moment in time. That's just like, you know, going to be here for a second, and then if everybody didn't catch it, they're going to like lose it. Like that's it. You can't see it. You know, you can go to Netflix, you can go to HBO, you can go to somebody's website, you can go to, you know, YouTube, you can go anywhere where people have their work live, and you can see it forever, you know, as long as that person keeps that spot available, meaning their website, or as long as Netflix continues to exist, or HBO, whatever, you're always going to be able to see that work. And I think that's really important now because life is becoming more and more disposable. Like, it's like fast food, you know what I mean? Like, we eat it for a second and then it's gone. Because I think we tend to get so caught up with tech, and specifically with cameras and lenses, that I kind of think we, in a lot of ways, we forget about the things that are really important. Like, you have to admit, I bet you most people watching this don't focus as much on, let's say you watch a lot of YouTube videos, right? Let's say you watch a lot of filmmaking space and photography space YouTube videos. Do you think about lighting as much as you think about lenses? Do you get as excited about lighting as you do about lenses or camera bodies, you know? Like, do you think about different colors of the spectrum and how you would light, and, you know, how to use natural light and how to make things look like real life? Like, do you even think about that as much as you think about having the newest, sharpest lens? And actually, what is the sharpest lens going to add to your film? Because do you really think that most of these lenses that are not the sharpest lens, do you think they're going to ruin your film? Do you think that anybody's even going to notice? But mess up your lights, people are going to notice that, you know? If your lights look unprofessional, if they don't look realistic, if they don't look, you know, like they don't make sense, you know? If you don't have practicals that are, you know, lighting your subject that, you know, if it just doesn't make any sense, I'll just say it again, that's going to be a problem, as opposed to, damn, I can't believe I used a 35 millimeter on this. I could have used a 24 because that lens is so much sharper. That's the only reason my film is no good. No, it doesn't work like that. You know, if things are clearly falling apart in so many different ways and affecting so many people who might not be you, when is it not okay anymore to ignore that you don't live here all by yourself, you know, that we all live here together, that we have to take care of one another, that we have to protect one another, that we have to be like disturbed that other people are being hurt, that other people are losing precious things like their lives, their freedoms. When is that okay to not talk about it, you know? It's not having anything to do with any longevity at all. Like, we don't have any kind of staying power anymore. Nothing lasts, you know? Nothing goes beyond this moment, and everybody gets so excited about this moment. Like, if you create a great post on TikTok or Instagram or Facebook or something like that, and people go crazy for like maybe a day if you're lucky, you know? But then it's gone. That's it. Do you think about sound as much as you think about a camera body? Like, are you as preoccupied with microphones and the different types of microphones that you need, like a boom mic, lavalier mics, shotgun mics? Like, do you think about that as much as you think about a camera body and dynamic range and all that kind of stuff? Because you should. Because the thing is, you have to think about, how am I going to mic this scene? You know, do I have to worry about cables? Do I have to go wireless? You know, do I have XLR? You have to really think about, how close can I get to the subject? Dialogue is everything. Do you think about that as much as a camera body? Probably not. We've lost the ability to communicate. And I think a lot of that is due to social media and this timeline life that we're living in, and the fact that things happen and then they're gone 2 seconds later. And then even if you want to think about it again, you can't, because it's gone. It's finished. It's over. And you're on to the next thing. The next thing might take you to a completely different place. It might be equally as interesting, or equally as scary, or equally as joyful, or whatever. But we don't have a chance to sit down on anything and just be with it for a moment, to like meditate with something for a few moments, a few hours, a few days, a few months, for the year. We don't get to do that. We're not training ourselves to live like that. We are just literally in the moment, but I think in a very unhealthy way. And I think that's really dangerous, And I think the other thing that's really crucial as a filmmaker is that we get to document things that perhaps are becoming harder and harder for people to access, like books are being banned, right? So who's gonna document history, things that are happening, Who's going to be the one to say, I was there, and this is what happened, and these are the people who I talked to who were there as well, and they're, also saying the same thing, so obviously it happened. Like, who's going to do that? Filmmakers can do that, Who's going to talk about things that have happened in the past, Like, the most important thing about filmmaking, in my opinion, is that it's about everything that already happened. It's gone. And it's so important for us to know that stuff, because that's the only thing that we can learn from, You know how they say people who don't understand history are doomed to relive it? Do you think about, like even a tripod, Do you think about a tripod as much as you think about, what lens to get, or, like, the thing is, like, I have a bunch of tripods actually, but I don't have like the most expensive, crazy, most, the tripods that can do the most things and give me the most angles and stuff like that, because, I can pretty much do anything I want to do with everything that I have, But my tripods, a few of which cost way less than $100, are so much more valuable to me than having every focal length covered for a film, Or having a camera that has 14 stops of dynamic range instead of 12 stops of dynamic range, or, no. My tripods are what are, keeping my camera safe when I'm out in the street, when it's raining, or when it's muddy, or when it's snowing, or when I'm out in the middle of New York City, like on Park Avenue with all this traffic going by and people walking by, and like that's really important, Tripods that can get high and can get low and can do different angles, and I'm thinking about stuff like that. I'm thinking about what is going to support my story. What is going to make the story sound the best? What microphones? What's going to make it look the best? I'm focused on that. I personally think that the worst thing is to not talk about it. I've learned in my life, the hard way, that when something's bothering you, if you don't talk about it, you can lose everything. Especially if it's something really important to you. And I know in my life, I have done this multiple times where, you just kind of don't talk about it, let it go, just see what happens. Everything will work itself out, you know. I don't need to deal with this right now. I got other things to do. I got important things to do. I don't need to deal with this right now. When in fact, you're about to lose something incredibly precious. Like if we're just living in the moment, what is that? You know, what are we learning from? How are we going to grow? You know, how are we going to continue to evolve as a humanity? You know, when I'm working on a film, I don't really have to think about my focal lengths, because it's not like I have to debate whether to use a 28 or a 50. It's pretty obvious when I'm going to use a 28 and when I'm going to use a 50, you know? And honestly, I'm keeping the 28 millimeter on my camera most of the time, you know? When I'm putting the 50 on the camera, it's very intentional. It's like if I have a really intense monologue, for example, and I want the camera really close and I want to get that compression and tons of bokeh, because my 50 millimeter is a f1.4. So I can really get a very specific effect if that's what I'm looking for. And it ain't all about you all the time. You know, sometimes it's about somebody else losing something precious. You know, sometimes you turn around and you're living somewhere that you don't even recognize anymore. Like the whole world around you has changed. Or sometimes it does affect you directly, and you've lost everything that you thought you knew that was solid, that was your life, you know, that was what you thought was going to be your world for the rest of your existence is suddenly all changed. It's all gone. Simply because you didn't talk about it. And sometimes, and I think in most cases, when you do that, it's irreparable. I mean, you know, I think that we have an opportunity as artists to keep things alive, you know, memories. You know, this morning I watched something and it was just about sports, but, you know, which is so unimportant in the grand scheme of things, but for some people it's really important, and it reminded me of some stuff that I had done with my father when I was little that I hadn't thought about in years, you know what I mean? You know, a time that is really not that long ago in the grand scheme of things, but seems like 20 lifetimes ago because of this timeline that we're living in, you know, where shit just keeps happening and it's never ending and it never stops, and you know, you like catch something real quick and then it's gone. You know, as opposed to having like a whole bag of lenses and deciding between a 28 and a 35, or a 35 and a 50, or a 50 and a 75, or a 75 or an 85, like, you know, 24 or 28, or 20 and 24, or 16 or 20. It's like, you could drive yourself crazy when it makes absolutely no difference at that point. Like you are wasting time, you are losing your focus. See what I did there? You're losing your focus on what's most important, which is telling the story, you know? You're not thinking about that. You're not thinking about the dialogue. You're not thinking about the character development, the exposition of the story, you know? You're thinking about the wrong things, you know? So, you know, discipline yourself. Get 2 focal lengths, master them, understand the way you want things to look and the way the 28, like, and again, I'm just speaking from my own personal way of working right now. You know, I know the way most of my shots, I know whether they're going to be either 28 or 50 because of the way the lenses look when they're on my camera. So I don't have to think about a million different things. That's why I kind of don't like working with a zoom lens, you know, because a zoom lens just, then you start futzing with like little, you know, you're like micro focusing, or, you know, micro focal lengthing, you know what I mean? And it's like, it's a waste of time. You know, you don't need to do that. You know, just move back 3 feet, move up 3 feet, you know, put on the other lens, 28, 50, whatever, 24 or 50, like, you don't have to think about all that. I think the fact that this is something that most people don't seem to do very well is communicate, is, I think, showing up in the world right now. Like, well, certainly in the United States, we're so divided, we are so unable to communicate with one another right now. You're either on this side or that side, and that's it, you know? And everybody thinks that they know the truth, you know? And they know what's right. And if you don't feel like they feel, they are literally disgusted with you. And that happens on a personal level too. You know, people don't talk about it, but they know they're right. And they dig their heels in and they sit right there. Or they just let it go because they got other things. You know, they got other important things in their lives. They got, you know, tomorrow's another day, whatever. And what, you know, nothing has a chance to settle you know, we don't have a chance to just like really consider anything. You know, we don't have a chance to like really think about something and decide what we're going to do with it, you know, how it's going to affect us, you know, how do we feel? You don't really get to feel anything, you know, you just get to feel the moment, and then that's it, it's gone. And you know, the other thing is, I think that as filmmakers, especially, and photographers too, but as filmmakers, and I guess I speak for theater artists too, you know, we have an opportunity to create history, right? To create legacy. You know, we have the opportunity to like make work that is going to live forever, you know, to document life. And when you think about it, there's a lot of stuff going on in the world that is putting, I don't want to get political, but putting our history at risk. You know what I mean? Like, there are people in this country, in the United States, who want to pick and choose what history they want to teach children. And so how awesome that anybody with a camera can sit their parents down, or their grandparents, or their friends, or whatever, elders in their community, and tell the stories of their community. What happened? You know, get an 80-year-old to sit down, get a 100-year-old, you know. I mean, imagine how valuable that is if suddenly it's not accessible to everybody who's not an artist, you know. Like, if you're not an artist and you don't make movies, or you don't, like, if you don't document things as a regular thing, either for a living or as a hobby, then that's going to kind of just trickle away. You know what I mean? And we're going to lose so much of where we were. And I think that filmmaking and photography is so much about where we were and what was. I'm so grateful that we live in a place here in the United States still where we can protest, we can argue, we can disagree freely and openly without worrying about, you know, anything happening to us bad, you know. Unless, of course, you're in a bad relationship with somebody and they might beat the crap out of you, or you have some crazy neighbor, or some crazy person shows up and shoots you, you know, like that kind of stuff. But, you know, but I guess that's my point. Less and less do we have that freedom. Less and less are we living in that world, you know. And the root of all of it is that we're not communicating, you know, because we just don't want to talk about it, you know, we just don't want to deal with it. So I think filmmaking is really important to keep us human. You know, it's funny, like, I'm talking about so much stuff right now. There are so many incredibly important things for us to think about. There are so many contributions that we can make as artists, you know, that are just so far beyond just entertaining people or making people laugh, or which making people laugh is a really important thing. But there are so many things that, you know, we have the great opportunity to take things that are hard for people to deal with, you know, that people just don't want to talk about or whatever. You know, they roll their eyes when you think about it, or when you bring it up. You know what? I don't need to deal with this. It's after 5 o'clock, or it's summer, or it's my day off, or I don't want to talk about it, when it's something that should have been talked about for days or weeks or months or years sometimes. It's really, it could be really damaging, and it could be really deadly in many, many ways, metaphorically and literally. And you have the opportunity to turn that into something fantastical, like just beautiful, magical, amazing, that people will actually enjoy, you know? Like, you could talk about racism, you know, or school shootings, or, you know, whatever, you know, you could talk about anything that's like so horrific, you know, hurricanes destroying communities, destroying entire cities, you know, earthquakes, war. You know, you can take these things and actually create beautiful, moving stories, inspiring tales, you know, add music to it and sound design. You know, that's another thing you need to think about that I'm really focusing on now more than ever, is my sound design, you know. Like, if I'm thinking about, can you imagine if I'm thinking about the difference between whether or not I should go with a 28 or a 35 for this shot? Who cares? What I should be thinking about is the sound design, the music, you know. That, you know, what aperture am I shooting at? How do I want the frame? You know, how do I want the depth of field to play out? And how does that relate to the story? That's what I'm talking about. How can I make every frame look like a painting? So, I don't know. I guess as the season's changing and the leaves are starting to turn and it's starting to get cooler, the transition has me really thinking a lot about this. And I guess with the election coming up here in the United States in about a month, and all of the kind of craziness that's going on and the unknown that's ahead of us, we have such great opportunities, you know. So yeah, you know, pick 2 focal lengths and think about all this other stuff, and don't think about that. Like, take that out of the equation. And by the way, get 1 great camera. You know, actually have 2 great cameras if you're a professional, you know. If you're a professional and you rely upon this for your life, or if you're even a hobbyist or an amateur or whatever, which doesn't mean you're not equally as talented and as gifted as a professional, if you can afford it, have 2 camera bodies, because one can go down, you know. So have 1 camera body that is your main camera, have 2 focal lengths, you know, 2 prime lenses. And if they're vintage lenses, you ain't gonna spend more than like a couple of $100. And focus on all the other stuff, you know. Focus on the opportunity that you have. Focus on this chance that you have to live forever, to make other things and other people live forever, exist for the rest of time. For as long as humanity is still here, you have an opportunity to leave something here. I mean, that's so much better than choosing between, you know, a 40 and a 50 right now. Like, who cares? It doesn't matter. So that's the main reason I like to stick with 2 focal lengths, to be honest with you, you know. I mean, in my case, the 2 lenses that I use most of the time, I found them in a camera bag of my father's after he died. You know, my father was a photographer in the war, in World War II. And so after he died, I was going through his stuff and I found his camera, a Minolta, which is lit up back there. And I found these 2 lenses. And so I didn't know anything at that time. I hadn't even touched a camera in my life at that point, but I kept them. And then when I became a filmmaker years later, when COVID took my theater and shut it down, and so I had to find another outlet for my stories, and I started using these lenses. So I only had a 28mm Telesor f2.8 and a 50mm Rokkor f1.4, both Minolta, and that's how I learned, all manual. And so that's what I use, you know. I had a Sony a6400 first. It was an APS-C camera, and I tried all the APS-C lenses, and that's how I kind of learned, you know. White balance, ISO, focus, depth of field, all of that. That's how I really learned, you know. But not until I got the Panasonic S5, and I went all manual and started to work anamorphic as well, did I feel free, and did I feel the same way that I feel in the theater for the first time, because now I kind of narrowed myself down. Like, I had my gear. That was it. You know, I got this 1 camera, and I have a GH5 as a backup, but I have this 1 camera and I have 2 focal lengths to work with. And by the way, on my GH5, even though I could adapt these lenses to it, I don't. I have 2 lenses for the GH5. It's a 17mm f1.4, which is basically a 35, because it's the widest one I could find, and a 35mm, which is basically a 70. So I'm working with a 35 and a 70, full frame equivalent, when I'm using the GH5. So it's the same thing. And so not until then, when I got myself the S5 and I had kind of mastered how to use a camera and stuff like that, like now I know what I'm doing. I know the settings. I know how to make it look the way I want it to look. And I have these 2 lenses. I have a 28mm and a 50mm, and it's full frame. And now I know exactly what that looks like in my mind, you know, in my soul, in my spirit. When I'm trying to express myself, I know whether it's my 28 or my 50, and that's it, you know. Now, I don't know, it might be different for me if I was a photographer, but I'm not a still photographer, even though I do photography from time to time, but I'm really a filmmaker, you know, and so that's the way it is for me. So I guess it's not a big technical reason, and I guess it's not any kind of groundbreaking kind of reason, but I think all of those reasons are the perfect reasons to just limit yourself to 2 focal lengths, and I would get 2 prime lenses and shift your thinking to everything else. Stop watching all these YouTube, I mean, don't stop watching YouTube videos because they're all amazing. All the YouTubers are great. Everything is totally cool. I mean, keep doing that if that's what you want to do. That's fine. But if you're storytelling, if you're making a movie, if you really want to make a film, if you really, really, really feel the need to do that, then I would highly recommend this because it's worked so well for me, you know. And, you know, it's well documented on my channel. I made a feature film with my phone, so I had 1 focal length. And my phone was like the equivalent of a 27mm lens. And it looks amazing. You know, I got everything I needed, all the close-ups, all the wide shots, like I got everything. And I'll tell you, I never had to think about focal length, you know, like I just had to think about where am I putting the camera to get the composition that I want, you know, to get the frame to look the way I want it to look, and then I would set up my depth of field, and, you know, I didn't even have control of my aperture. Well, I did, but I figured out how to do that. Now, obviously, I couldn't control the aperture on the lens. It's built into the camera, I mean, into the phone. But because of depth of field, shooting closer to the camera, stuff like that, and I shot all manual because my phone allowed me to shoot manual focus, and I was shooting in 1080, 24 frames per second, and I learned so much about depth of field and bokeh. I was able to create bokeh because of how far I would be from the lens. And so, invaluable experience. So, okay, now I feel like I'm kind of drifting, so I'm going to end this video, but I highly recommend 2 focal lengths, 2 primes. You know, get them as fast as you can afford. You know, one of mine is f2.8, the other one's f1.4. When I'm in really dark situations, it does help a lot. And so that's what I would recommend, because then you are forced to think about the things that are important, not the gear. Because as much as gear matters, I love my gear, I love my camera, I love the image quality that I get out of it, love it. I love the way the lenses look. I love my anamorphic lenses. I am a total tech nerd. I love these little RGB lights that I have here. I love my stick light. I love all of it, you know. But I don't love anything in a way that even remotely approaches telling a story. Nothing. Nothing even comes close. And, you know, for me, being a solo theater artist, I always know that all I really need is my body. I could just get on stage. I don't care if I have lights, set, nothing. All I desire is an audience. Any space will do, because it's all about the story. Filmmaking is like being a mad scientist with it, and I love it so much. It's so creative. It's so amazing. We're like painters, you know. We're like Da Vinci working, you know, Da Vinci Resolve, but, you know, like Leonardo da Vinci. We're like great artists painting a picture, and we're like great novelists telling a story. We're Hemingway, we're everything all together, and we have this gear. And if we limit ourselves to a little bit less gear, I think we have more of an opportunity to use our hearts and our souls and our spirits to share the story and get all the tech stuff out of the way. Like, learn as much as you can, limit yourself to a camera and 2 lenses, get the right microphones and all that, and get your lighting together, and you got it. You ain't have to think about it. Just tell the story. That's it. And so if you're a filmmaker, I hope you're creating stories for all of us, and for our children, and for the generations moving forward. Do that. Anyway, I'm going to end this moment right now because I don't want to just talk in circles. I think you get my point.